The year is 1840, and we are standing on the threshold of a world that has forgotten what it means to be organic. You are not looking at a city in the way you understand one today, a place of residence, leisure, and civic pride. You are looking at a machine, a massive, grinding, soot-stained engine that has been deliberately engineered for the sole purpose of continuous production. In Manchester, the concept of the chaotic city is an illusion, because every shadow, every cough, and every brick is a calculated outcome of industrial efficiency. Between the years 1840 and 1850, this landscape became the blueprint for the modern world. We often look back at this era and see tragedy, but to the architects of the Industrial Revolution, there was no tragedy, only output. Pollution was not a mistake, it was the visible breath of profit. Disease was not a failure of the state, it was a biological friction inherent in the gears of progress. To survive in this environment was not a right, but a form of labor in itself, a constant effort to keep the human component from breaking down before the machine was finished with it. If we move our gaze toward the district of Ancoats, we find the true beating heart of this mechanical monster. Ancoats was not built for comfort, and it certainly was not built for beauty. It was the world's first industrial suburb, a dense concentration of steam power, coal, and the white gold known as cotton. Here, the skyline is a jagged, teeth-like arrangement of chimneys and mill walls, blocking out the sun so effectively that the concept of daytime becomes an abstraction.
Move your horses! Heave, lads, heave! We'll be here all day at this rate. Make way, move your backs!
The air here is thick with the scent of burning carbon, a permanent fog that settles into the lungs and never truly leaves. By the year 1845, the smoke was no longer seen as a threat to public health, but as a badge of honor. To the factory owner, a clear sky was a sign of a stagnant economy and idle hands. Therefore, the black plumes were accepted, even celebrated, as the proof of a productivity that never slept. To understand the logic of this place, one must realize that infrastructure always came before people. In our modern era, we design streets for pedestrians and cars, but in Victorian Manchester, the streets were merely the veins of the machine. The mills were clustered with a brutal geometry, positioned specifically to minimize the time it took to move raw materials from the canal to the loom. The human element was merely the fluid that flowed through these stone channels, guided not by personal will, but by the relentless ringing of the factory bells. These bells did not mark the passing of time for the sake of the soul, they regulated the movement of thousands of bodies simultaneously. A worker did not exist as an individual with a story or a family, but as a biological extension of the steam engine. The system was never designed to protect the dignity of the person, because dignity produces nothing. It was designed to keep the spindles turning, the shuttles flying, and the coal burning, regardless of the biological cost. Nowhere is the crushing weight of this system more apparent than on Oldham Road. This was not a civic space where neighbors met to exchange news, it was a logistics channel of unprecedented scale. The surface of the road was a shifting, treacherous layer of mud, industrial waste, and animal traffic, all merging into a single grey flow. Pedestrians here did not walk. They adapted to the movement of heavy carts and massive horses, sliding through the filth in a desperate attempt to reach their destination.
And then he literally slipped right in the puddle. No way, are you serious?
Oldham Road served as a physical record of industrial volume, where the sheer amount of material being moved was staggering. In 1847, the sheer tonnage of cotton and coal passing through this artery would have bankrupted a smaller nation. The people living along this road were spectators to their own displacement, forced to navigate a world where the needs of the machine had physically erased the space for the human.
Look at this.
The currency bundle plus 3 more.
No. I saw you looking at the power cell.
All right, the cell and the bundle. We have a deal.
If we step inside the walls of Murray's Mills, the sensory assault becomes even more suffocating. This was one of the largest industrial complexes of its time, a place where the air was not merely breathed, but worn by the body. To protect the delicate cotton threads from snapping, the air was kept humid, sealed, and recycled, creating a thick soup of cotton dust, oil, and sweat. This was an environment meticulously maintained for the health of the machines, while the health of the workers was considered an irrelevant variable. In the heat of the spinning rooms, which often exceeded 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the human respiratory system began to fail. Coughing was not a sign of illness, it was the background noise of the factory floor, as common as the clatter of the looms. Over the years, the lungs of the workers would slowly adapt to this strain, thickening with scar tissue until the very act of breathing became a laborious task. This was the price of the fabric that clothed the world, a silent, internal erosion of the self. The cruelty of the Manchester machine was that its influence did not end when the whistle blew. Industrial contamination followed the worker out of the mill and into the narrow alleys of their neighborhood. The fine white dust of the cotton remained in their hair, the smell of machine oil clung to their skin, and the heat of the factory stayed trapped in their bones. There was no boundary between the workplace and the home, meaning there was no space for the body to ever truly recover. Recovery requires a clean environment and stillness, two things that were fundamentally unavailable in 1848. When you cannot wash the soot from your walls or the dust from your bedsheets, the labor of the factory becomes a permanent state of existence. The expectation of rest became an impossible dream, as the industrial system colonized every hour of the worker's life, turning even their sleep into a period of slow, contaminated decay. See the ultimate failure of urban planning, one must look at Angel Meadow. This was housing built to fail, a collection of speculative tenements designed to hold the maximum number of people in the minimum amount of space. These back-to-back homes shared walls, preventing any cross-ventilation, which meant the air inside remained stagnant for decades. The walls were perpetually damp, the floors were often nothing more than packed earth, and the sanitation was a nightmare of shared privies and open cesspools.
How long until the ambulance arrives?
By 1850, Angel Meadow had become a place where illness did not just occur, it accumulated. Typhus, cholera, and tuberculosis found a perfect breeding ground in these dark, overcrowded rooms. When a worker returned to a place like Angel Meadow after a 12-hour shift, they were not returning to a sanctuary. They were returning to a biological trap where the lack of light and clean water ensured that any rest they achieved was ineffective and brief.
The graveyard filled quickly, fed by the overcrowded, disease-ridden streets of Little Ireland.
20 sovereigns, your price was 50.
Water, the very essence of life, was turned into a carrier of slow death by the River Irk. This waterway functioned as an open sewer for both the massive chemical works and the thousands of households lining its banks. The water was often thick with the dyes of the textile industry, turning shades of unnatural purple or deep crimson, while the stench was enough to induce physical nausea. It was a liquid record of everything the city wanted to throw away, yet it remained the only source of water for many.
Let go of me! I only took a loaf!
Silence! You're under arrest, now move!
Shame on you,
The harm caused by the Irk was not always sudden, like a plague, but was often a quiet, creeping decline. Skin infections that would not heal, digestive illnesses that drained the strength of children, and a persistent respiratory strain from the evaporating toxins. Those who lived closest to the river were the most vulnerable, their bodies absorbing the waste of a global empire. It was a form of violence that left no marks of a struggle, only the hollow eyes of those whose health had been stolen drop by drop.
They're attacking us! Help me, please! Make way! Run for your lives!
In the shadows of such a system, crime was not a moral collapse, but a calculated strategy for survival. In districts like Little Ireland, where the poverty reached its most extreme depths, the informal economy was the only thing keeping families alive. Theft, the illegal trade of goods, and the evasion of taxes were not acts of rebellion, they were the only rational responses to an irrational wage system. When the official economy fails to provide for basic human needs, the unofficial economy becomes the primary structure of society. Law enforcement in the 1840s was present, but it was largely a theater of control rather than a source of justice. The police focused on the symptoms of poverty, arresting the hungry for stealing bread or the homeless for sleeping in the street, while the systemic causes remained untouched. The people of Little Ireland knew that the law was not there to protect them, but to protect the property of those who owned the machines that were killing them. Yet even in this landscape of iron and soot, there was a flicker of controlled hope. At St. Peter's Fields, the site of the infamous Peterloo Massacre of 1819, the memory of struggle remained potent. By the mid-19th century, public gatherings had become more measured, shaped by a desperate need for survival rather than a desire for bloody revolution. The workers understood that to challenge the machine, they had to speak its language of organization and legality. The reform efforts of this era were not about grand utopian dreams, but about the right to live through the day. They fought for the 10 Hours Act, for the regulation of child labor, and for the basic right to breathe air that did not taste like coal. Hope was a fragile thing, often delayed and frequently crushed by the weight of the industrial interest, but it persisted in the quiet negotiations and the secret meetings held in the back rooms of public houses. Modern Manchester is a city that has been reshaped by the lessons learned through this immense damage. The parks we walk in today, the clean water we drink, and the labor laws that protect us all emerged because the conditions of the 1840s became impossible for the human conscience to ignore. The scars of that era are still embedded in the red brick of the old mills and the narrow geometry of the streets, serving as a silent reminder of what happens when progress is divorced from humanity.
Together. Heave!
As we reflect on this mechanical past, we must ask ourselves what machines we are feeding today. The Industrial Revolution may have changed its form, moving from the soot of Manchester to the digital clouds of the modern world, but the logic of efficiency over well-being often remains the same. The history of Manchester teaches us that when we treat human life as a replaceable component in a system, we do not just create wealth, we create a profound and lasting exhaustion of the human spirit.
Prominent sounds of heavy cartwheels rolling over concrete.
My advice to you, drawn from the ghosts of Ancoats and the mud of Oldham Road, is to guard your boundaries. Do not let the mills of your professional life follow you into the Angel Meadows of your personal sanctuary. In a world that still values non-stop output, the most revolutionary act you can perform is to rest, to breathe deeply, and to remember that you are a living being, not an extension of a process. How often do you find yourself prioritizing the machine over your own health? Are we, in our modern convenience, still living in a system that values the product more than the producer? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below, as your perspective is the final gear in this narrative. I wish you all great health and the clarity to see the machines for what they are. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep reflections on the stories that built our world. Until next time, Stay mindful of the air you breathe and the time you claim for yourself. 307s. Are we, in our modern convenience, still living in a system that values the product more than the producer? I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below, as your perspective is the final gear in this narrative. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep reflections on the stories that built our world. Until next time.
Remember when this used to be so dirty?
Look at it now. It's wonderful. The kids love it.